Hi, I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining me for another exciting episode of From the Corner Office. Economic uncertainty and strict regulations have made the airline industry among the most challenged in these extraordinary times. After a decade marked by continuous consolidation, seesawing customer satisfaction, and technological change, airlines were literally grounded by the Covid-19 pandemic, wiping out as much as 90% of domestic and international travel. As the sector seeks to rebound, executives must also respond to demands to make serious commitments to diversity and racial equality. There's perhaps no one better suited to address these issues than my guest, Doug Parker, the dynamic chairman and CEO of American Airlines. Among the world's largest carriers, American Airlines generated annual revenues of $44.5 billion and served more than 200 million customers in 2019. An industry veteran for more than 3 decades, he has proven to be a strategic, innovative leader, adept at steering companies through challenging times. He became CEO at America West just 10 days before 9/11 and led the company through that crisis. He orchestrated the merger of America West and US Airways in 2005, and then guided it to achieve record revenue growth, operational performance, and profitability, soaring above its industry rivals. In 2013, he assumed his current role after the successful integration of American Airlines and US Airways. During his tenure, the company has produced impressive financial results and unprecedented investments in personnel and infrastructure while significantly boosting shareholder value. At the same time, he continues to serve as an exemplar for industry-wide transformational leadership. That is clearly evident as he steers his industry to embrace his professional and personal mission to infuse racial equality and inclusion in every aspect of business and society. Doug, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Butch.
Absolutely. So, Doug, I would love to, this is, as I said, we start this conversation off, these are unprecedented times, and would like to cover, in our period of time, in our short period of time, 3 topics. One being the travel industry as a whole and how you've seen that transform over the last 10 years. Let's put aside this last 3 months for a moment. And what has been the impact of the COVID pandemic of COVID-19? And then lastly, to touch on the pandemic of racism that has also infused corporate America, infused this country over the last 3 months, but has really been going on for a much longer period of time. But would love to get a little bit of background just to start with in regards to one of the things I thought was really interesting is that you became the CEO of an airline 10 days before 9/11. And would love to use to talk to us a little bit about that time and how crazy that time was, and then what you've seen evolve, because there's no industry that's been more regulated, frankly, than the airline industry.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks again. It's this, so much of what happened, in 9/11, we had an industry that was fragile and fragmented, and not too many airlines trying to do the same things. And 9/11, first after the tragedy of 9/11, it also, as we came out of that time, what it highlighted was that we had an industry that wasn't long-term sustainable in its current structure, and that it was followed on by a number of bankruptcies, consolidation, and this is going to sound strange at this point in time, but a lot of hard work to transform the industry to make it financially sound, which we had done. So these mergers of American, US Airways, and Delta and Northwest, and United and Continental, Southwest and AirTran, while it resulted in fewer carriers, still an incredibly competitive industry, and one where we all could provide for consumers a much more utility. So instead of each of us trying to steal share from each other and always being dysfunctional, we've gotten this industry to one that was much more financially sound, was making profits, which business needs to do. Fares were remaining low, And we had finally gotten, it felt like, and it does still feel like, we'll get there again, we'd gotten to an industry that could do what business is supposed to do, which is produce profits and also focus on the customer much better now that we were financially sound, and you could see that happening in all airlines as we continued to upgrade the product, put more and more into attracting customers, and we were much more competing now on trying to attract customers to our airlines based on where we fly, when we fly, the product you have on board. So it felt like we'd gotten this industry to a point that we really had finally, at least the U.S. business, got it to where it had been transformed to an intensely competitive business, but one that actually could, wouldn't go through these incredible ups and downs that we'd seen, through 9/11 and even before that, as the industry fought through, a very long deregulation process. It finally felt like we'd gotten it pretty close to stabilized. So anyway, that was a lot of hard work, but that's where we were. It's where we are. It's just now, this obviously this crisis is
Right.
one that no business like ours anyway can sustain 90% drops in revenue.
And in the last 10 years in particular, Doug, the airline industry has had, really an outstanding safety record, frankly. And the consolidation was probably what the industry needed, but it also created profits, for the airline industry, which had been, over the last 10 years, record revenues, record profits, great safety record, what have you. So it had worked, in the scheme of things, it worked. Significant investment in the product and also significant investment in the airports and more of the traveling public traveling. What are the things that you did or that the airline industry had to do, but more specifically perhaps American had to do, that made this investment so necessary and made it so attractive to such a large number of people?
Yeah, again, I go back to, as you just said, the consolidation really was important in that regard. When you have an industry that is so dysfunctional and so fragmented that no one in the business can be long-term profitable, that business doesn't get investment. So we didn't have the capability to invest in new aircraft. Most of us didn't. We didn't have and people would talk about airport infrastructure. The airports are they're nonprofit businesses owned by the municipalities. The way they generate their revenue is from the airlines, and if the airlines can't afford to provide the airports with enough funds to go do investment, they're not going to be able to upgrade the airports. So once we got to where we were indeed profitable, then the investment came, and investment again that all of us I think would have liked to have done. No one wanted to be flying older aircraft. No one wanted to have airports that weren't, meeting the standards of our customers. We simply couldn't afford it. So as we got through that, you saw all that start to happen. American Airlines spent $25 billion over 5 years on new aircraft. We simply could not have done that as an independent American and independent U.S. Airways. But combined, and in an industry that had gotten itself well, we could do that. So $25 billion of investment just in our own aircraft. Not to mention several $billion in the airports where we fly, and all the industry did that. So that's why you see a much better product now for our customers. And I said it's not just the infrastructure of the aircraft and the airports; it's the product as well. Investment in Wi-Fi on aircraft, investment in a better product on board the aircraft is all possible. And the right thing to do, of course, for our customers, but things that just can't be done in a business that was every year, it seemed like, trying to figure out how it could survive.
So that brings us to these last couple of months, which have been unprecedented, but would love to get your point of view on, it continues to evolve by the day, but, COVID-19, when did you get your first indication that there was a problem, and not necessarily here in the U.S., because you do a lot in terms of international travel as well, that there may potentially become a problem here in the U.S., and then ultimately, what has been that impact on both the airline industry and American Airlines in particular?
Yeah, it's interesting it wasn't that long ago, but it seems like forever ago that we first started hearing about this and what our views were about how long it would last and how much it would impact us. So anyway, I remember being in Washington D.C. For a meeting of our lobbying group of CEOs. So there were a number of CEOs in town for a regular meeting of that group, and those who were flying, who had a bigger presence in China, United in particular, saw this sooner than we did. And we all knew about it. It was news, but they were seeing their traffic drop off more than we were, and they were talking about it more than we were. And it was a week later that we all were in the same shape. So I don't think any of us in the business saw it dramatically sooner than the country did at large. Maybe, like I say, a couple of weeks before, and those who were serving China more than others might have seen it sooner. But then it just so rapidly went from, well, is this really going to be an issue for us, to where this is going to be the biggest issue we've ever faced in the industry's history by far. And even then, back in March, as we were working on getting legislation to help really get the industry through the crisis, I don't think any of us thought it would be this. I know none of us thought it would be this severe for this long. That we'd still be, now in June, looking at revenues that are, while they're better than they were in March, they're still, now they're 80% of what they used to be last year. So anyway, we've experienced this, from the beginning, as I think as much of the country did, which is, okay, is this really is this going to be something like SARS? Is it going to be something, or is it going to be like Ebola? Those things, they came and they went. We did not anticipate this from the beginning. I don't think we could have. But once it came to the United States, and once it became clear how serious it was, and particularly once all these stay-at-home restrictions, when the NBA shut down, all those kind of milestone events happened, it became quite clear that we're going to be very little demand for air travel, and it went away overnight. And it is gradually coming back, but very slowly, and we don't anticipate it's going to come back for quite some time to where it was.
I've been on a number of flights more recently, back and forth through Charlotte, which is a huge hub for you all. And I've seen the traffic pick up from, let's call it March. And March, I took a flight and there was 4 people on the flight, literally, towards the end of March. And more recently, I took a flight and the plane was full. But you guys have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep passengers safe. You were at mask well before the country, frankly, was really at utilizing the mask and all the other things. Talk about the safety of airplanes, and when I say airplanes, not the plane itself, but the efforts you've gone through to make it a safe experience for folks, because I think that's part of what is a misunderstanding right now. And the people are like, oh my God, if I go in there, I'm going to be breathing the same air as the other 115 people, and I'm going to, I'll come off and I'll never be able to walk again. So talk a little bit about, how the system works, what happens with the air, what have you, because I think that would help to, demystify some of the fear that folks have about flying.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do so, because you're right. Well, first off, we need to acknowledge, and we do, that the kind of traditional social distancing that we're used to having, now throughout the United States, or at least try to have in most of our interactions, 6 feet of social distancing, isn't something that we can provide very well on the airplane. So we do everything else that you are supposed to do in such an environment, and I'll walk through those. That does make it entirely safe. First off, as you mentioned, this has always been the case, but I think a misconception amongst some travelers. The air on the aircraft is high quality air as you're going to be breathing anywhere as you go through the day. The air in the aircraft is circulated with fresh altitude air every 2 to 3 minutes. And it's circulated through things that are called HEPA air filters, which are hospital quality air filters. So that air that's in the aircraft is again, much higher quality air than I'm receiving right now sitting in my office. So that the air is actually an enhancement versus where you would be in most places. So that's not an issue. You're not breathing each other's air over and over again. It's being circulated every 2 to 3 minutes. It's being circulated through these filters that would catch things like that would filter out things the size of the coronavirus. So that's point one. But that's always been the case on airplanes. Or it's been the HEPA filters are new over the last few years, but that's been the case prior to the virus. Since the virus, we and all airlines have dramatically enhanced our cleaning procedures of airplanes. Before every flight now, we go through and make sure the aircraft get a complete cleaning of tray tables and seat buckles and all those things. And overnights, make sure we do things like electrostatic cleaning of the aircraft to kill off any sort of virus that might be on the airplane. So that's being done as well to make sure it's perfectly clean. We've done other things like not having flight attendants hand, bottles and cans back and forth to customers in the rolling carts down the aisle. In the event that happens, the flight attendant's always going to be wearing a glove, and it won't be passing back and forth between customers. And then lastly, as you noted, and probably as important as all of this, since we can't have the level of social distancing that the CDC recommends, what we do is what you do in the case where you can't have that level of social distancing. We ask all of our team members and all of our customers to wear facial coverings. And all this works, by the way. I know it works because we see the COVID infection rates of our pilots and flight attendants who fly airplanes 3 times a day, 3 days in a row. And those rates of both the pilots and the flight attendants are lower than the national average. They're lower than they were back in March. When we first came out of this and didn't know enough about it, absolutely, we saw our flight attendant rates increase to a level that was higher than the national average. That's when we took all these actions, and those actions have worked. And indeed, now we're at a rate, like I say, for our flight attendants and our pilots that is well below the national average. And these are people that are flying, like I say, 3 times a day, 3 days in a row. So it's not the act of flying that is unsafe by any means. Indeed, it's entirely safe, so long as everyone does what they're supposed to do and wears a facial covering. We're doing all the rest of the things. We need to insist that our customers wear facial covering. We are doing that, by the way. We and all other airlines just announced a week or so ago that we are serious about this, and that if there is willful non-compliance by a customer, they're not going to be flying on American Airlines. We had to ban someone last week who insisted on not just not wearing a mask, but then letting everyone know via social media that he had chosen not to do so. That made the investigation pretty easy. So that individual is not going to be flying on American again. It's not for him. It's for our other customers that need to be confident that when they fly, they're going to be safe. So we're doing all those things. It does make flying safe. More and more people, I think, are understanding that. Because you're right, more and more people are flying, and they're flying and realizing they're certainly not getting sick from flying. If they do, as much as anything now, we need reasons for people to fly. We need business to open up. We need places for people to go that actually, the beach markets have a lot of demand. The mountain markets have a lot of demand. But we still need the country to open up in order for people to travel, because traveling's safe.
No question. Let me pivot to another pandemic, on one of which that American has been a leader in, and you've had a personal experience, but I'd also love to have you share as well. But and that's been the unfortunate incidents we've seen over the past 3 to 4 weeks, or last month or so, of with the pandemic of racism. And it's always been here. And for those people who are African American males in particular, have always experienced or felt this in whether your personal life, business life, what have you. But perhaps due to social media, perhaps due to whatever the environment is, what have you, for it to be played out on stereo, for people to be able to see, that man effectively basically choked to death, and other incidents was a real pivotal moment, I think, in this country. And I think that, and corporations and people began to respond. And American and the entire travel industry as a whole, but American in particular, was at the forefront of that. But before you got to that point, I'd love for you to be able to share, which I happen to know of, that you had a personal experience that just came about right after this particular experience, and that had to do with racism and seeing it through a different lens that you had perhaps had seen it before, and it seemed to have a very moving, experience to you. So, can you share with us, what that experience was and how that has sort of helped to transform your own thoughts and leadership in this area of racial equality and moving diversity and inclusion forward in a positive way that's a benefit to the business?
Yeah, happily so. I'll share the encounter, and then we can talk about what you'd like to talk about after that. So yeah, okay. So a couple of weeks ago, I got to start the story by admitting I was flying Southwest Airlines. I needed to get, but it's an important part of the story. I needed to get to Panama City, Florida from Dallas. The American flights, amazingly enough, were sold out by the time I decided I needed to go. So Southwest had a seat available. I purchased a seat on Southwest. I go to board the Southwest airplane, and I'm trying very hard. I'm hoping very much that I'm not recognized by someone saying, hey, Doug, what are you doing flying Southwest? The mask helps. So I go to board the airplane. I'm boarding toward the very end because I purchased my ticket late. And I pull the book that I'm reading out because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get my backpack under my seat or on top. So I pull the book out, board the airplane, walk as far back as I can to the back and sit down. The book, by the way, is a book called White Fragility, which a black board member of ours, Marty Nesbitt, had recommended to me a while back. I had begun reading it a while back, a few months ago, and as the crisis hit our business, I'd stopped reading it. And I'd gotten myself like halfway through it and knew I'd get back to it, but I hadn't gotten back to it. A fantastic book, by the way. At least for someone like me, the book talks about how white people are very bad about talking about racism in America. I think that's why Marty recommended it to me. Because it's important for white people in particular to understand this. So anyway, but I hadn't gotten myself to finish it. And the tragic and horrific death of George Floyd led me to believe that I need to start reading this again. So I brought the book on board and went and sat in my seat. And anyway, I'm back there with my mask on. And my second admission is I put the book in the seat pocket cover. As soon as we got at altitude, I turned on Wi-Fi and started. It was a Friday. I started engaging in work emails, and it wasn't even reading the book. But anyway, thankfully, and this is the encounter. I'm kind of woken up from this, emailing barrage by a flight attendant who was working up front, who came back. A woman named Jacques Hill comes back, sits in. I happen to have a row to myself. I'm in the window. She's sitting in the aisle seat, and I hear this. How's that book? And I look over, and here is this young black female looking at me, asking me how this book is. I haven't looked at the book. I pull it out real quickly, and I say, "Well, it's fantastic. I'm halfway through it, but I'm still reading it." And she says, "Well, I saw you bring it on. And I've been praying, throughout the day how I was going to get through work. And I saw you bring it on, and something just told me that I need to come and talk to you." And then she started to cry. And, and I was, I felt wholly inadequate. All I could say was, look, the book's great. It talks about, it's not your fault. It's our fault. It's a book that tells, people like me need to have these conversations. We need to talk about it more. And that's what I'm just trying to learn. And, through tears, she said, "So am I." And we talked for a good 10 minutes. And anyway, at the end of the conversation, she tells me her name. She says, "I'm Jacques Ray." I asked her name. She said, "I'm Jacques Ray Hill." I said, "Well, I'm Doug Parker. And by the way, I'm the CEO." I felt like I should tell her after all this time what I did. So I said, "I'm Doug Parker." She had no idea who I was, by the way. I said, "I'm Doug Parker, I'm the CEO of American Airlines." And then she starts to cry again. She goes, "Oh my God, my mom works for you in DCA, in Reagan National in DC." So then she leans over and gives me a little hug. We have masks on, socially distanced, and goes away. Her mom then sends me a note telling me, how much I impacted at her daughter, which again, I find all this ironic. This was a gift to me. But she somehow, her courage, somehow I was at least able to be there enough for her to listen, that she felt like her prayer was answered. So her mom thanks me. I respond to her mom, letting her know that look, this encounter, your daughter's amazing. She's a gift to me. This is now on me to go make a difference, even more so than I thought I had an obligation before. And I'm going to go do that. And anyway, all this transpired. Jack Ray ended up putting it out on her Facebook page, which got a lot of attention. I ended up sending it touched me enough that I felt compelled to send a note to our officers, telling them what had happened from my perspective. The stories, fortunately, were exactly the same, just a different perspective. So I sent out a note to our team about it. This was right about the time that corporations started sending these, kind of, here's our statement on what's going on. And again, back then, it was mostly about Minneapolis, but here's our perspective on what's going on and what we think about it. We had drafted a similar type, well-written, thoughtful note from me to the team. But our corporate communications team said, that note you wrote to the officers is a better thing to send to the team than this corporate memo that we've drafted. So we sent that instead. So anyway, the combination of all that is it ended up getting a good bit of exposure, not because I wanted it to, but mainly because I think it was a story that resonated with a lot of people. What I know is this: the story is only a story from my perspective. The only reason I'm in this story is because of what I do. Jack Ray Hill's the brave individual who started the conversation. I was reading a book that says I should start those conversations, and I wasn't doing it. I walked past this, in this environment, I walked right past that woman and didn't think for a second that she might be hurting, and didn't ask her about it, didn't think to ask her about it. She looked like she was fine, so I assumed she was. And shame on me. And it happens all the time. And the conversation that we had was meaningful and profound and impactful to me. And it's my obligation now to go make sure that because I have the ability to do more with this than Jack Ray Hill does. She's the hero of the story, but I'm the one that has the ability to go make more change in the country. And I need to go do that. And that's what I've learned from it. The second thing I've learned is, because the story took, on such a life that it did, the notes that I received from people on the American Airlines team about what it meant to them is just a combination of saddening, because I didn't know it was, it's in someplace hard to admit this, because how could you not recognize it? We've been having these conversations long enough, for God's sakes. How can you not know it? But again, I just didn't take the time to listen well enough to know that people were living this every day in their work. Because again, you just get to where you think that these people, the Black people that are here working and succeeding at American Airlines are doing well and are happy with their lives, and they aren't feeling the same thing that's going on elsewhere, but which is ignorance, of course. But to hear from all of them, that I go out and cry in my car at lunch because of what's going on in the world, was extremely eye-opening. So we're taking all that, recognizing that the work we're doing, that we are proud of, that we have been proud of, is simply not enough. We need to do so much more, and we intend to do so.
That's a great story, Doug. I guess the only question is, how does she get away? How does she not how was she not working for American Airlines to start with? I'm sure you'll fix at it in some way, shape, or form soon. Right. But I do think what's interesting is that you got an opportunity to experience something and see something through a lens that I would submit to you, most senior executives in corporate America, white, really do not get a chance to experience and I don't think people wake up in the morning deciding, and this is my own personal belief, I don't think people wake up in the morning deciding, how can I find a way to exclude people today? Right? I don't think that's not a natural human for the majority of people, right? They don't wake up and say, my goal today is to find a way to exclude people. The issue is that oftentimes that you can be tone deaf, or you can be blinded by what you're doing on an everyday basis. And if everything seems to look normal, whatever that would be, you can just say, well, you seem to be fine. I mean, you're earning a good living and things are well and what have you, and not understand that there actually is some deep-seated pain underneath it. And I think what's interesting is you have led the charge to, not just with corporate America, but within American Airlines and throughout, where people are engaging in these open, honest conversations. Tell me how you guys have done that at American. Has this, helped with the senior management team and then just the employees in general? What has been the response? I mean, I know what the response was to this note.
Right.
It's taken on a whole nother, unexpected, but an unexpected positive thing. Because I will tell you, African Americans have been touched by this, right? No question. We've been touched by it, and not just touched by it because it was a touching story, but touched by it because of your particular response and your willingness to be honest and candid about what you missed, right? And that has meant a great deal to your employees, a great deal to your board. But again, if you could, just what are the things that now that American is doing to address this so that others can have the same experience, if you will, that you had?
Yeah, thanks, Butch. So, well, first off, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you and your family for the impact your family's had on American Airlines. Your father, Earl Graves Sr., of course, was a board member of American for 13 years, and was a voice in that boardroom for diversity. I wasn't here while he was a board member, but I've heard about it over and over again. And what I know is we have the top award given at American Airlines for diversity and inclusion is the Earl G. Graves Award for Diversity and Inclusion, which you've been nice enough to attend a few times and honor those honorees. So his legacy lives on here. We've tried very hard to live his message. And like I say, we're proud of the things we have done. We were one of the first companies, for example, to require implicit bias training for every single employee on an annual basis. We started that a couple of years ago. But again, it's not enough. That's what we've all learned over the past few weeks or months. Is it's simply not enough. We as corporate America need to do more, and we can do more. And these programs that we've done, while well intended and good and good meaning, and you're right, no one's off. I don't think very many people are off trying to exclude others. They're not breaking down the systemic racism that exists in the United States, and in many ways reinforcing the systemic racism that exists in the United States. It reinforces our comfort by telling us that we're doing these things, but not really doing things to break down the barriers. And that's what we need to go do. So the first thing we can do is corporate, and it's really important that corporate America do this in a system where our government doesn't seem willing to do it. So we do have a voice. We use it to lobby for all sorts of things. We need to go use it to lobby for these types of issues. But we need to start first, and we can make a huge difference within our own companies. That's where we at American are starting, but we also can use our voices to make change in collectively throughout the country. But starting with what we are doing in American, in addition to what we've done now, knowing that we're not doing enough, is we are indeed starting by listening. We just had one of those sessions just yesterday. Me and my senior team, with thanks to our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, brought in a collection from around the system, different jobs of Black team members, to just have a conversation. It was impactful. It was meaningful. I will say the worst part of the conversation is how many of our team members said, "I'm tired of talking about this. Where's your action?" And we're back to talking again. So I get that, and we need to have action. But what I tried to encourage them to know is this feels a lot different than the prior conversations. One, these conversations, people are being more open about what it feels like, and I hope they're feeling more receptivity, because there is a lot more receptivity, and I think there's better understanding of the old stuff wasn't working. So the conversations are important, and I know Black America is tired of saying of hearing let's have conversations, but we need them. Those conversations they're at a different level right now, and there is more receptivity. And one of our team members said, what I'd like to have is listening sessions with those that are excluding people. Let's get them in here and tell them why it is they feel the way they do. Which is a really good point. But my point to them was, look, this is it. And someone else noted that, gosh, something over the last, maybe it's with the change in administration, it's gotten a lot easier for those types of people to say what they think, and they were maybe muted before. But look, them being muted before wasn't helpful either. I'm not saying that them saying what they think is the right thing either, but having conversations is the right thing. So anyway, these conversations are important, is my point, and they need to be open conversations. And I do believe now there's a lot more receptivity for people to say what they think, and for white people to hear it better and to understand this is not going away just by talking about it. What do we do about it? So that's the follow-on. Is what do we do about it? We need to make additional steps. We make commitments at American to do just that, in addition to listening sessions, in addition to making, which again, we're doing and we're going to keep doing. But that's going to result in good work. I know we have to do a better job of having diversity in the organization. We have a very diverse organization in American Airlines, but we can do better. But it requires intentionality. We have to set goals for ourselves. We have to lay those goals out for the team so they can see them, and we have to make sure we have processes in place that allow blacks to get promoted to jobs at a level that represents the actual representation of the United States. And we're not there. So, but that takes intentionality. We can't just keep talking about it. We can't keep saying we're going to keep recruiting at historically black colleges and universities, which we do, and we do hire, but those people don't get promoted at the same rates. That's not right. And we need to make sure that we're setting goals and objectives for those to happen. We measure all sorts of other things, as one of our team members mentioned yesterday. And somebody that works in an airport said, I can tell you exactly why a flight got delayed, but we don't seem to measure exactly how many of us are getting promoted. And he's right. So we can do a lot better. We're going to do a lot better. And this is making the difference. There's more to what we're doing, including, like I said, using our voice in Washington and in the communities we serve to make sure they're all working together for things like financial reform, criminal justice reform, educational reform, healthcare reform, all things that need to happen, breaking down those barriers that exist in our country. Because look, if it's not going to be done by the people that are responsible for doing it, then we as corporations have an obligation to make sure it gets done for the people that work for us and that are our customers.
Yeah, I will. I'll share with you, Doug, that intentionality is at the top of the list of what's important, right? African Americans, as you mentioned earlier, have been hearing for decades conversations, and it's going to get better, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to have a town hall to discuss it and what have you. And ultimately what people want are actions, right? They want to see actions, and they want to see not just talking about it, but they want to see walking the walk, not just talk, and not just talking about it. I spent a fair amount of time talking to corporate CEOs and corporations all the time about what they can do. And they said, and some of them put out very flowery mission statements. And we embrace diversity, and we love all people, and all these are different, or even have more recently committed resources, financial resources, say, hey, we're going to be out here to fight racial injustice. And then people say, what is it you folks want? I said, what we want is very simple. We want jobs, we want promotions, and we want to level the playing field so we can compete on a level playing field. And I would be remiss if I didn't compliment American and under your leadership and your leadership within technology in particular, because this is an area where, people don't realize how much technology plays a role in what American does. But last year, or what was last year, during that year, we did a hackathon with American Airlines. And that hackathon was where we brought together 20 HBCUs from across the country, and they brought their their tech teams, right, to come and do this hack thing for 2 days. And to your credit, even in this environment, which is extraordinary, American hired 15 people, 15 young folks, engineers, tech people, to come and work out of your headquarters. And as I said, the part to your credit is, even with this pandemic, and even though people can't necessarily physically start the way they would have normally started, if you will, as the year ends and they start their new, you have maintained that commitment to those 15 young people. And it's a huge thing. It would be huge even if it wasn't with this pandemic, but it's even larger, and the impact is even more while people are, because there are a lot of young folks who I've known who had job offers and they were either rescinded or delayed until, listen, we'll get back to you in 2021. And you guys have not done it, even though that right now is a difficult time. And that's very important. So I want to compliment, again, American and you and your leadership team for doing that. Listen, you have been very generous with your time, Doug, and we appreciate Black Enterprise, appreciates the partnership, our family. American has always meant the world to my father. In fact, when he spelled airline, American, and I know he's smiling down upon us having this conversation today. So again, thank you very much for your partnership. Thank you very much for being so open and honest and candid with our audience today. And this will mean a lot. This will mean a lot as we share this with other folks in regards to what corporate America can do, because certainly you and American Airlines have demonstrated what it will mean to us. So thank you very much, Doug.
Oh, thank you, Butch. It's an honor to be with you. And look, hold our feet to the fire. Let's do this again in a year and make sure that we're not just, these weren't just conversations. We've got to use this opportunity to go make real change. We've got to be intentional about it, as you said. We intend to do so, but please make sure we do.